Welcome to the TechForum webcast. Thank you for joining us. TechForum has been running conferences in New York City since 1995 for IT professionals who work in cybersecurity for mid to large organizations. The TechForum mission is to provide a platform for sharing our experiences, managing new and disruptive technologies that improve the competitive advantage of the businesses we work for. If you'd like to learn more about us, please visit us at www.techforum.com. In this webcast, our moderator will be Priscilla Tate, the founder and director of TechForum. We look forward to hearing any feedback and are happy you've joined us.
Hello, I'm Priscilla Tate, the founder and director of TechForum. Today, we're going to take a look at the increasing role machine learning and artificial intelligence are playing in enterprise cybersecurity. AI has moved from science fiction into mainstream. Manufacturing is using robotic process automation. Police departments are using facial recognition, and we're all using Siri and Alexis. Today's discussion, however, is specifically about machine learning and endpoint protection or endpoint detection and response, EDR. To lead us in this discussion, we're joined by two enterprise savvy security professionals, Chris Pittman of Blackberry Cylance.
Hello.
Hi, Chris.
Good to
Yeah.
see you.
And Ray Stirbei,
Hi.
who's an information security executive who works for a global jewelry retailer. Both of them have over 25 years experience in enterprise IT and security management. They hold advanced degrees in computer science, IT management, digital forensics, and numerous security certifications. So that said, let's begin with you, Chris. Tell us about yourself, what you do. Tell us about Blackberry Cylance.
Sure thing. Thanks. Good to see you guys. Happy to be in this discussion today. So I'm an SE manager for Blackberry Cylance. I oversee our field sales engineering teams here in the central United States. So this is a pre-sales solution architecture, system design, and helping to enable our customer security solutions. On the back end of that, I'm a passionate security professional. I teach digital network forensics at a couple universities here in Michigan, and happy always to drive forward the conversation around how machine learning is kind of transforming the landscape where network endpoints and sort of the overall picture of security is concerned, where corporations, users, home users, whatever the case may be, are adopting new technology.
Yeah, well, tell me a little bit about Blackberry Cylance, because you have two names and I understand they're coalescing into Blackberry.
They are, yeah. So I was a member of Cylance, which was a pioneer in AI, one of the first folks to operationalize AI at the endpoint security level. BlackBerry's been around forever, doing everything from mobile device management and IoT security. And the marriage between these two companies kind of makes sense when you consider putting endpoint security on mobile devices, whoever's the manufacturer of that mobile device, whether it's Android, Apple, or someone in the future. So when you can combine AI-based endpoint security with the mobile device management and application security that BlackBerry's been doing for years, you see what we're doing in the marketplace now, which is providing a security solution regardless of what that endpoint device may be, that's based on a lightweight agent driven by AI that can be ubiquitous across those platforms.
Critical, yeah. Now, Ray, you're also familiar with Cylance. You used Cylance at some point, or have used Cylance?
I've used Cylance in the past, and in fact, I'm using it personally right now. But I've been, by way of intro, I've been like Chris doing information security professionally and personally for a long time. I built and sort of managed, corporate app security functions, data security, a little bit of privacy, which also is up and coming, and especially this topic of machine learning and AI, and obviously almost every sort of every domain within security. I was a consultant for more than 10 years. So I'm very interested in this topic of information, machine learning, particular is exciting to me because I dabble a little bit in college. I dabble a little bit, on sort of on my way sort of throughout my career. And I always see it like there's a tremendous amount of potential with this technology. And I think we're we're not getting close, not yet, at least from what the full potential is. But yeah, definitely looking forward to conversation.
So machine learning, AI, we use them almost interchangeably. Should we spend some time just kind of like parsing out what we're talking about today?
I think there's a couple things to distinguish, right? AI is a catch-all term. It's a broad and generic term that's kind of like the masses will say, hey, anytime a computer seems to do something that it's thinking on its own, that's AI. But under the hood of that, what we're really talking about is machine learning, and machine learning is basically the use of math. So it's one or more algorithms that's ingesting, correlating, and making determinations based on data. And that can be supervised. So there may be a human in that chain that's helping to educate that algorithm based on the outcome. Or it may be like a deep learning or a neural network that's sort of learning on its own based on outcomes and reteaching itself to refine its results. Ray, you'd probably add something to that?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. I thought most of the models today are supervised, right? Where a lot of time is spending on classification, what's good, what's bad, right? Sort of regression. I was going to ask you, Chris, whether you have sort of seen a lot of other, I've seen only one expert systems sort of play in the space. Very little deep learning neural network type of sort of solutions. Actually, I want to ask you if if you basically combine the forces or other models.
Yeah, so I think we're working on that. There's some new innovation that's coming to the market, not just from us, but from some other folks who are driving data science, right, from an operational standpoint. So I think the real promise, as you mentioned, that we haven't seen yet, but we're on the cusp of, is where we do combine the both of those things. So in our products, right, where we're leveraging AI to stop, block, or intercept malware, that's supervised, right? We're feeding an algorithm a couple different stacks of files. One stack is known clean, the other's known dirty, and then we let the algorithm sort of identify the characteristics that differentiate those, so that when it sees a new file, it can kind of use what it's learned to make that distinction. On the other side, when we get into sort of the biometric uses of AI, that's where we use some of the real life learning of AI, and it begins to understand who you are, right, by your characteristics, by your behavior, and it learns and builds profiles for you on the fly. When we marry those two things together, we can come up with a comprehensive security picture that's not just protecting a device against malware, but it's ensuring that you are who you say you are, and that you're in a safe place, and that everything is as it should be, as you interact with your devices, your applications, your company, your home resources, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Well, you talked to us about being able to use the user's temperature, movement, gyroscopes, that kind of thing in modeling behavior of the endpoint.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah, this is brand new, or I guess, I mean, we've on the BlackBerry side. So these were sort of tandem projects. So BlackBerry, from the mobile device standpoint, had been utilizing and tapping into the different controls within a mobile phone that include the gyroscope, that include the environmental factors, and more advanced phones provide more and more ability for us to leverage those data points. But
including
with that,
what words we tend to misspell frequently.
sure, right? So they begin to understand how you carry your device, how you walk, what your gait is, how you use your fingers to swipe on the screen, how you type, the cadence that you type, the words that you do tend to misspell. So I can build a profile for you that's not based on 1, 2, or even 10 different characteristics, because the fewer number of characteristics, the greater the percentage for false positives, right? But if I can include dozens or hundreds of characteristics, then I become more and more confident that you are who you say you are. I reduce my mistakes about your identity. But when I learned that, you walk a certain way, you hold your device a certain way, and you tend to misspell these 10 words, if someone suddenly starts, spelling that word right, I'm going to become a little bit more suspicious, and I may start, weighing that score, weighing my confidence score in you a little bit differently. Yeah.
You'd think humans would get better every time, but they don't. But machine learning can, right?
Sure can. Yeah.
The other side of the title really is using machine learning to fast track zero trust. So, Ray, why are we using this word zero trust?
I think it sort of comes around to sort of the buzzword bingo that I think, Chris, you alluded to earlier, around what sort of marketing terms are around. I think the world of computing today was really built on the opposite of zero trust, right? Essentially, sort of a trust account, all access, root, all God. Essentially, you're God to that machine, and that has been most of the commercial world has been involved in. I think the word zero trust, at least to me, and we'll sort of go back to the nomenclature of Forest and Beyond Corp, but it's really around restricting or limiting
Mhm.
trust between the user and data, right, or resource, et cetera. And that obviously comes in with, I think what you mentioned, Chris, a little bit, looking at behavior, right, authenticating contexts, devices, et cetera. But just to be transparent here, we're still having the world is still having issues with just password, based on the simple God mode, root account. We're still managing a lot of challenges with those. So I think as we add more complexity to it, this is where you need machine learning to essentially be able to scale, right? Scale the factors and scale the effectiveness.
Yeah, I think really only AI is going to fully allow us to exist in a world of zero trust, because
Right.
the principles that Forrester and others have laid out for zero trust says I don't trust the user, I don't trust the device, I don't trust the session, I don't trust the application, I don't trust the data, right? Anytime two of these things touch, I need to be able to make a transactional decision on if this should be allowed based on all of those factors. Only AI can do that at machine speed without creating friction in the user. So like the little term that we throw around here at BlackBerry is zero trust with zero touch. So we have to be able to allow a zero trust security framework while at the same time not increasing the amount of friction both on the part of the security admins to manage that or on the users that between them and whatever they're trying to do from a productivity standpoint. Because if you get in the way of a user and what they're trying to do, they're going to find a less secure way of doing that, right?
Yeah, that's a very classic. I learned that lesson very early in my career, right? Effective controls are transparent and non-intrusive, right? And I think most of the security control anyway, they're intrusive, right? I'll give you an example with MFA. That's a classic why we haven't had it for a long time. And we talk about it for at least 2 decades. So yes, I would agree with you. I would agree that that machine learning in general is one of the ways that we can at least one of the best ways we have so far, right, to sort of scale and operationalize.
Yep.
Well, I think one of the most important things about the phrase zero trust is that it was kind of suggested by a research company, Forrester, I believe, and it's almost a joke, and business loves it. Business loves zero trust. So we use this word, even though as a security professional, we may not feel comfortable saying, we're impermeable and impervious to attack. But zero trust is something that business really appreciates and wants. So we need to modify. Our job is to communicate, and we have to use the language they like.
Yeah, and I would agree that really, I think the original Forrester Zero Trust article was 10 years ago now, but it was just this year at RSA back in February. I was walking around the exhibit hall, and that's where I saw Zero Trust posters. Like every product had some kind of a claim around zero trust frameworks or zero trust functionality. Nobody even really agrees on what it means yet. It's what AI was 5 years ago when everyone was saying, yeah, we have AI in our product. Okay, great. What does that mean? Well, we don't know, but we have it. Right. That's where zero trust is now.
Yeah, it's go back to the buzzword. In fact, actually, Gartner has a hype cycle, right, around sort of which ones are trending up, which ones are trending down. What I've seen also, to your point about Priscilla, about trust. In fact, I've seen just the information security titles and world moving into a chief trust officer, or the trust department, right? I think it's very interesting about how sort of they think about quantifying and managing trust. But I think to your point earlier, Chris, yeah, we're quite some way to get there, but we're making progress. Really making progress.
I think trust comes with some heavy implications when you're a security professional, and if you're just a normal person, a trusted device doesn't mean the same thing it does to us. But one more point. Endpoint protection is what we're talking about, and we've always been talking about endpoint protection. What is in this situation? What's different today in endpoint protection than say what we were doing 2 years ago? I always like to get relevant. How have we come along?
So I think from our standpoint, what we see with our customers, right, is that the question that comes up the most is how do you define endpoint? I think even just 2 years ago, endpoint was still all right, it's desktop, it's laptops, and it's tablets, and maybe it's some level of mobile devices. Now, and as opposed to 2 years ago, an endpoint may be anything that's attaching to my network. It may be my fire suppression system. It may be a healthcare device. It may be anything that I need to secure. So I need to expand my definition of what an endpoint is. And then once you do that, traditional models of endpoint security are more difficult to apply, because you can't apply the same principles of endpoint security to maybe an IoT device that you can to a laptop, desktop, or even an Android phone. I know, Ray, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Chris. I do think that so I think once you expand to an IP based or anything on the network, there's a revolution almost in the number of devices and flavors and things, the context. I was just thinking when you said that, I was thinking of target breach, which is, who would have thought, right? HVAC system is, has any IT security implications, but it does. It does. But I was thinking, actually, going back to the basic problem of just, locking down AV, right? Just locking down endpoints like laptops and workstations. We moved on, we evolved from signature based, I see this is bad, let's sort of quarantine, etc., into a lot more complicated and nuanced solutions. But at the end of the day, I see large companies getting ransomware and attacked by these sort of high profile malicious code. And I bet you almost 99% of them are running some sort of tool, security or otherwise, right? Some sort of EDR solution on their devices, yet they're still in the news. So I think we haven't fully cracked that problem. And I think I think the whole fundamental issue is, if you're doing prevention, you're relying on staying ahead, right, of the attackers. I think that's probably not the a fallacy in itself. But I think that's probably the issue with why we're always in this sort of cat and mouse game.
No, I love what you said there. And you're speaking my language when you talk about prevention, right? So there's these competing or even combating ideas in the security space of either one, assume compromise, right? Because there's probably something in your environment or on your devices that you don't know about. So assume compromise and then build to your security infrastructure teams and processes to be able to find it and remediate it. So that's the model behind endpoint detection and response, or EDR. You mentioned prevention, right? If I can stop it from happening in the first place, that's a different kind of security investment and a different kind of tool. That's where AI is really best positioned, because when you come from traditional endpoint security, which is signature based or even heuristic or behavioral based, there still requires some level of a patient zero. Someone has to get it infected in order for us to study it, learn about it, and then build an inoculation. Whereas if we have an active machine learning model on a device, whatever the device is, then we can intercept that even though we've never seen it before, just based on what the machine learning language can identify about the threat. That's not a perfect, right? Their AI, as we famously has been said, AI is not the silver bullet. There's still going to be some level of things that slip by. So you still need the detection and response. But I think if you shift a little bit more of your assets to prevention, you reduce the overall noise of alerts in your organization, and you can redeploy your security teams in more strategic ways.
Yeah, in fact, I was hoping to use that pandemic analogy. So sorry. But yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I think it's a combination of it's not just a bullet, right? We need sort of shields, machetes, all kinds of things, sort of helmets, right, to sort of defend ourselves. But I think going back to the challenges and opportunities here for machine learning, I think that's what, at least to me, put Cylance on the map, right? Is that OPM hack where the model kind of picked something up where the other guys didn't, right? The other sort of other machine learning tools that didn't. But like I said, I think the cat and mouse game is also intrinsic, and I want to get your perspective, Chris, with some machine learning models as well, right? Because it's still talking about good data, bad data, good data, bad data. So I think that's perhaps where, until we move on to some more supervised or something a little more autonomous or semi-supervised, right? I think we still have that problem of the cat and mouse game.
No, I think you're right. And it is an issue of data, right? There comes a time where there becomes a scarcity of new data to use to train your models with. So that's where we come in. And then there's the issue of when you're training your algorithm, right? You can you can push more file sets of clean and file sets of dirty, and you can move the needle from like 80% effective to 90% effective to 99% effective. And that's when it becomes very, very difficult to start moving the needle more and more, because you need literally billions and billions of new files in order to just make one like 0.1% improvement in your effectiveness rate with supervised learning. We absolutely do. To your point, we need to get into sort of the neural networks. And I think so there's promise here where quantum computing is concerned, but we're also seeing the benefit of using multiple machine learning models within an environment. So if we can supplement a model that's running on an endpoint to block malware with another model that's doing things like in validating your identity, and then another model that's doing things like intercepting and validating network traffic without even necessarily having to decrypt it, just looking at the metadata around the traffic and the traffic patterns, we can begin to see patterns that give us indicators of bad things happening. And if we can string together those multiple points of data, we can increase our protection levels as well. Go ahead, Priscilla.
If I could just inject here, we've gone on a little bit longer than we said we would on just our talking about why we're having this discussion. But I want to move right into some of the challenges that we're facing. We did a membership survey, a quick 3-question survey, and the results came back. The 2 top results that people said the biggest challenges to endpoint security came back as the negative impact of security on user productivity and endpoint performance. That was number 1, and tied with the same number, like 70% of the people said this was number 1, the high complexity of their organization's cybersecurity deployment and operation. So the 2 challenges haven't gone away; they've stayed the same. And what can you say machine learning will be able to offer to help us address those true challenges? It's not just a people, process, and technology thing. This is something that's almost emotional.
No, I would agree. And I think, so here's an example of like the promise of AI. And you talk about the performance issues with traditional security solutions. And here in the central US, I'm responsible for a lot of accounts that are driving some level of manufacturing, whether it's building a thing or a pill or whatever, or a beverage, whatever it may be. The devices that run those manufacturing facilities are very precisely configured to do a certain task, and putting a security solution on top of those has the potential to interrupt the productivity, and productivity interruption equals decrease in revenue. But what we've found is that when we can implement a lightweight AI-based security engine on a manufacturing system like a SCADA or a PLC, we're actually giving them back cycles of their CPU so they can produce more. And that's because AI in general, when it sits in the kernel of an operating system and it's just intercepting files at the point of execution, it doesn't need to do things like monitor processes, do buffer overflow protection, inject stuff into the registry. It's just more lightweight in general. I think that's one of the promises of AI, to solve some of those problems around performance. If it does that in manufacturing spaces, and we've had success there, it does the same thing by order of magnitude on a user's machine, where they have 5 different security agents, 3 that are built in by Microsoft, a DLP, something else, right? And we can reduce those just by having that lightweight AI agent that sits in the kernel. It gives them back a lot of processing power.
Yeah, I would say that it's, I was sort of thinking when you mentioned that, sort of an analogy that somebody gave me a long time ago with endpoint security and agents, with basically the AV agent was akin to like having this big bodyguard, right? Sort of follow you around, right? It sits in your room, takes your space, eats your food, right? And it's really a sort of it's really good for very specific scenarios, right? Attack scenarios.
Right.
It's not gonna, so I think that's sort of what I was sort of mentioning when you mentioned that. So I think the context of having a lighter agent that does more, I think has also been around for a while. I think implementation, is really where the secret sauce is. And that's the same for machine learning in general, right? I think the idea is technologies, what Chris, you mentioned earlier, right? Machine learning, AI, these are decades old technologies, right? Behavior analytics, this is not new stuff, but it's how you implement it.
Well, speaking of behavior analytics, I just had a conversation with a member who said that people who are attacking us have mastered a lot of the behavioral analytics we're now using, so we have to take it up a notch. So how is machine learning going to be doing that?
You can do that, Chris?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do with our model, right? So we have two data science teams at BlackBerry, right? There's an AI team that builds our models to protect our products and our customers. There's another team of data scientists that actively tries to attack or compromise our own data science, right? Our own machine learning. So it's an internal adversarial AI team that's testing the validity, the intelligence, and the effectiveness of our AI. We have to be doing that internally as well. The one thing I think the industry doesn't recognize is that, as we throw around the AI term, there's a significant amount of importance around machine learning pedigree and the maturity of the model. If you're going to get into the machine learning world, it's going to take time for you to build and train and mature your model. There's no short stepping that process. So, we have a model right now that's 7 years old, so it has 7 years worth of training and maturity and refinement. That includes that internal team that's adversarial AI attacking against it. So I think you have to use AI to improve your AI, I guess is the bottom line answer to that, Priscilla.
Well, Watson probably can beat itself at Jeopardy now.
I would love to see that match.
Yeah. So I was thinking of this. I'm sorry, go ahead, Priscilla.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Now, when you mentioned about using AI, and I was thinking about the whole singularity philosophical component, right? Sort of, we're all getting towards machines, but I would just to sort of stay to ground it here. So anybody can, I think, as Chris mentioned, anybody can go in and go to Google, Amazon, Microsoft, right? Get you a machine learning in a box, right? Just start throwing data at it. It's very easy to do. I think to me, one of the biggest challenges and opportunities, to be honest, with these models is essentially constantly tuning it, right? Go back to the cat and mouse game. So the machine learning can figure out new patterns, right? See new things, absolutely, right? But I think to the point that Chris made earlier, you still have to sort of supervise, right? You still have to say, okay, this is good, this is false positives, this is not, and constantly tune it. And that process is not. I don't think it's very obvious to people, right? Say, look, it's machine is learning on itself. It's not learning by itself, right? It's learning by itself with some human help and guidance at every step of the way.
Bringing it back to the enterprise, based on both of your experience, working with your companies and lots of customers, Chris, what is the first place where people are, where machine learning is having some success? Or is there a certain kind of application or situation where machine learning seems to be a win, a low-hanging fruit?
Well, so I think what's happening right now is utilizing machine learning where identity is concerned, and as we were talking a little bit earlier, when we can have access to the characteristics of the person, their behavior, their location, and also their interactions and the data from the devices that they're carrying. Here's an example. One of our customers is a law firm. They do a lot of international work, and they're involved in politics and things that may put some of their lawyers in danger at times. So what we're doing with AI, right, is constantly identifying their safety, not just based on where they are, but things like their biometrics with their devices. Are they suddenly are their biometrics suddenly changing in a particular situation? Does that indicate a possible kidnapping? Does it indicate possibly that they're in danger? And right, that moves into an emergency management system. So there's a couple of software management solutions that corporations like these law firms or political agencies may have that can immediately notify emergency personnel that there may be a possible emergency with a person in an international location. So that's an area where we're utilizing AI to just ensure the safety of employees as they travel around the world, not to mention all of the pandemic applications that are probably going to come out in the next year or so.
Well, Ray, talking about things we've seen and experienced, do you have any comments on machine learning and where it's really best applied in the enterprise, where people say, oh yeah, that's where we're going to do machine learning here?
Yes. So I have, again, without not endorsing any tool, technology, or even sort of machine learning model per se, I do want to say that I've seen most traction in a sort of an enterprise environment with sort of pattern recognition, right? So taking a lot of sort of SIM data, a lot of security event information, and kind of sorting through it. That's been a sort of a model people have been working on for many years. I think one of the earlier ones, I think malware was next. And I think within a specific set of parameters, I think it could really identify stuff at scale faster than any SOC analyst, even the best of. But again, it's a narrow use case, but we can certainly, if we can take that use case, I think we can certainly expand it to others. And obviously malware, right? I think malware also, machine learning models have also proven themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, in some scenarios.
So what is the Achilles heel then of machine learning? What do we have to watch for? Many things, I guess, but in particular.
So I think one we hit on a little bit earlier is the maturity of the model. So that's something you have to look into, right? You have to look beyond the claims of we have AI or this is what our AI does, and you have to start looking at how mature is that model, because it takes time, training, effort, people, intelligence, and a whole lot of sample data to train a model. I think number one is maturity. Number two is I think would be the risk of believing that it is the silver bullet. It's not. You still absolutely need human beings. We're going to need human beings for a long time in order to make those rationed, informed decisions at the point of incidents.
Yeah, and I also say, just from looking at, just to sort of add to that, Chris, I think the data, having good data is a really hard problem.
Yes.
Especially having good data at scale. It's a hard problem. It's a really hard problem to solve. Mm-hmm. And also looking at, now there's sort of these machine learning evasion competitions and kind of challenges. And, looking some of the early ones, maybe a few years ago, I mean, it was like epic results, right? That's like somebody tweaked something small, and then the whole thing just kind of went out the window. So go back to the cat and mouse game, right? I think it's what you said, Chris. You're sort of constantly learning, right? Constantly learning, constantly evolving.
Yeah. And the people required for it. I mean, data scientists don't grow on trees, right?
Yes.
So finding these folks who understand the math and understand the labels, understand the classification, and understand everything involved in this formula to build the AI cake, those guys are rare.
Yeah.
Well, aren't we going to be making more of the data science automated? And will we need a different skill set in a person that comes into the business process of analyzing data?
Oh man, that's an interesting question. I think first of all, I would just say an umbrella statement: the world of data science and the level and amount of job roles that will exist under that in a year from now and 5 years from now will explode exponentially. Does that field allow for some level of automation? Yes, but even that automation then necessarily includes more human factors to support the automation. So once again, I think even as automation grows, the need for human element increases as well.
Okay, this has been a wide-ranging discussion. I kind of want to bring it back to a close and allow you each to kind of summarize your points of view for the discussion and ask this question. What will you be saying about the value of machine learning and achieving zero trust a year from now? Put it on your calendar.
Mm-hmm. Ray, you go first.
Okay, so I think the potential. So going back to, I think what we kind of the topics talked earlier, the potential for more unsupervised machine learning as being applied right now in behavior analytics. I think that has a tremendous amount to evolve, right? The space has been around for a few years now. The evolution has been, I would say, exponential from what I've seen, early models to, where I think Chris' scenario was somebody's in China on vacation, try to log in, and all the alarms are going, step one, it's totally fine, right? We're just logging in off hours, right? Because it's a different time zone. So I think from that model to kind of where we need to be and where we are today, I think it's very far. So I would say, I would speculate that unsupervised learning models for analytics, behavior analytics, is probably we're going to get a lot of bang for the buck.
Oh, yeah, we're going to be doing it. Okay, that's great. Yeah. Chris, you get to wrap it up.
Yeah, I would agree. So I think that we've only just begun with the term of zero trust. We're going to all be really good and sick of it this time next year. But I think we'll actually have some products and solutions that actually make it possible. And I think one of the most important things will be when the various security vendors have their tools and their software and their appliances capable of interacting together to accomplish zero trust in an ecosystem. No one is going to probably buy all of their tools from one vendor to achieve zero trust. So it will require cooperation and the evolution of standards by all of those security vendors in the space. So I think the biggest thing that will happen between now and next year will probably be the evolution of some actual standards around what zero trust means and how to get there. That's what I see.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think the one thing we know about the people process technology piece is technology piece is going to be open source.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
tend to
And
agree.
just to sort of tag on to Chris, I would love to see that. I've been a corporate buyer of solutions, security solutions, for at least over a decade. And I'll quantify the cooperation and the standards as kind of like a world peace sort of problem to solve, right? We talk about it. It sounds great. Never I see anything close to it, right? You have a standard, somebody takes it and have 5 standards now, right? So 5 flavors of standards. So I hope for all our sakes, Chris is right, but I'm not
Well,
I'm not as optimistic.
Yeah, well, I'll get back together again next August and see how we did on these predictions.
Okay. All right.
that sounds like a plan. I want to thank both of you, Chris Pittman, sales engineer, security engineer of BlackBerry, get that right?
Thanks,
And
Priscilla.
Ray Stirbei, Vice President of Information Security for Signet, a global jeweler, retailer in New York. Thank you both for participating in this today, and we'll do it again next year. Take
Sounds
care.
good. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks.